Morning, you guys. So I know I just did a video about loving yourself, but I couldn't help but do another video because I just feel so strongly about where I'm at in life that I really want to share it with others to not only help them kind of understand what I'm going through and where I'm coming from in life, but also to have it be a give and take where you can give advice to me, but also to take from whatever I'm sharing with you that serves you. And so, the last video that I just shot, I was talking about loving yourself. In this video, I'm going to be talking about something that is, in some ways, is connected, but in some ways, it's different. And this is something that I also have been. Um, well, I wouldn't say it's something that I'm struggling with now. It's something that I did struggle with a lot 2 years ago, and now coming to this conclusion, whenever I have this feeling, it's something that I instantly don't go, oh, this is why this is happening to me. I instantly go, okay, this is probably what's going on, but at the same time, to kind of think about, the different possible to why it's happening in the moment. And this is the word silence. Um, Silence has been playing a very, very vital role in my life. Like I said, I struggled with this 2 years ago. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a history, um, you know, kind of an not history, kind of more of an update on where I was at 2 years ago. I was in my first apartment with some roommates, and my whole thing was, well, it wasn't the it was not the it was the it was there was more to it than this, but it was the main reason why I was on my own with roommates. I wanted to try to figure out who I was and everything, and when it came to the whole spectrum of belief when it came to God and everything. And so um I would find myself, reading, God's word. It didn't matter what book it was, but I was just reading it, and then I would find myself praying and meditating on it, and just praying to God in the whole space of things, like just help me to see clearly and take from this what you would have me apply to my life, that kind of thing. And I wouldn't get anything right off the bat. I would just, like, as soon as I was done praying, I would there would just be this space of just nothing but silence. And at first, I was kind of, if I'm to be honest, I was kind of angry at it because I don't know where I got this, but um, for a very long time, I always thought that if you were to pray to God and read His Word, and you did all that, and that you were and that you believed that it was, the case, that you, one, had to hear an answer like right away, and and if you didn't, it was because that there's probably some unconfessed sin, wrongdoing in your life that you need to make right with God. That was the only thing that I knew about the silence, was that it was a form of punishment that He was giving me. Um, but then there was a moment where this was kind of when I started to wake up and realize is that silence isn't really an enemy, it's more of a friend. I woke up one day and I just realized, you know, there is the possibility that he could be using silence as a way of punishing me for something that I was unaware of doing. Or what if it's the bigger picture? What if he's using it as if for me to, do more research, or to, look at, like go outside and be silent, and just look out at everything that he has made and done, you know, to just take that silence, and instead of seeing it as a negative thing, what if I were to see it as a positive thing, you know? Um, and I didn't know it at the time 2 years ago because I was questioning it, but looking back on it now, I understand that silence isn't something that God uses as a way to, you know, um, belittle you, or in a way punish you. He uses it in a way to draw you closer to him, to draw you to becoming more in tune with him. Uh, you know, and yeah, so that's a little bit on my deal. But just like I did with the last video, I'm going to share with you another koi fresco video. This one is slightly a little longer, which is totally fine. And it's entitled From Silence Comes Enlightenment: How a Quiet Mind Can Meet God. So we'll watch this, and I will talk about it a bit. We'll dissect it, and hopefully there's something or some things applicable that can serve us better in our daily lives to help us lead more joyful and happier lives. So let's get going on this.
What is up, and welcome to Koi's Corner, a channel for personal and spiritual growth. I am Koi, and today we will be learning about something known as silence. Something very common, something that occurs all over the world and within each of us at certain times, but something that we also very, very often overlook and do not give enough credit to, especially when it comes to personal growth and how we are developing upon our path in life. For silence is the secret weapon of all spiritual teachers, speakers, and practitioners, including yourself, around the world. And when we miss out on silence, when we fail to recognize on a core level just how impactful and life-changing silence can be, we change our lives. Will change. And the way we accept and expect things to be also differentiates because of whether or not we have the ability to embrace it or not. Now, I would like you to think for just a moment on the last time you embraced a silence. When was the last time, whether you were out with friends, by yourself, with your emotions, in nature, when was the last time you sat with it all? Without thinking, without critiquing or analyzing. When was the last time you allowed reality to be reality, free of your input? Now, granted, that was a short amount of time to think, but if you don't have an answer, that might be a good indicator that it has been quite a while since you've been in that position. For some of us, we may not have ever been in that position, because in the Western world, speaking is creating reality. Thinking is giving a definitive name and understanding to what we experience. Because we don't embrace silence. The Western world has a problem with silence. We have, I dare say, a fear of silence. And this is why, incorrectly, we view the world as two types of silence. In a scientific notion, we have the understanding that I see most people having of silence being complete soundlessness, complete lack of noise, complete lack of anything that can be understood audibly by our ears. But to us as humans, this silence doesn't exist. The ear, even in the vacuum of space, even in rooms that have been designed and engineered by colleges around the world to be the quietest in the world, to block out 99.9% of all noise, we've discovered that even in these spaces, the ear hears itself. In the same way that if we are in a pitch black room, the eyes will start to make their own colors, shapes, and images because they cannot account for the lack of sight. If we have the ability to see, if seeing is a part of our daily life, then we don't have an opportunity not to see. Unless, of course, we are born blind or born deaf, in which case these sensory experiences and these fundamental aspects of life are not with us. But with sound, it functions in the same way. We can never not hear. We are always taking in noise. And so complete silence, at least to the human body and through our senses, doesn't exist. There is no such thing as complete silence for us as a being that uses it on a daily basis.
At times, sorry.
Our potential is way up here, and we are operating way down here.
Hold on. I apologize for all these different ads. That's the one downside to having just
as a being that uses it on a daily basis.
Back.
So let's just throw that away right now. Let's just toss that incorrect version of silence to the side and come to see true silence. And that is nothing but a state beyond speaking and thinking. True silence is the embracement and allowance of noise, of sounds, without attaching, defining, or explaining, not just to ourselves, but to others, what they may be, what they may mean to us. And this is our aim. For us as human beings, if we are going to embrace silence, it means embracing a space that we can live in beyond defining and explaining, beyond trying to fill the orchestra of noise that reality gives us with our own perception on what that noise is, on what all of that even means. And this is hard for us in the West, mainly because, to us, silence is a byproduct of language. We see the world through language. We see the world through the linguistic conceptions and the syntactic awareness that our brain picks up upon because we've been taught language since before we could walk. We have been always pushed upon us this notion to understand things and to define things, to be able to fit everything that you encounter into a box that makes sense for you. And this includes spiritual wisdom. We can take in the teachings of gurus, of spiritual masters, of very impactful different books and texts, but we have a problem with allowing ourselves to learn on our own, purely from the teacher that is life itself and nature itself, the audible teacher, the teachings of sound, the teachings of reality moving as it wants. And this illusion that silence is a byproduct of nature is the first step in seeing that silence is, if truly embraced, an enlightened state, or awakens within us an enlightened state. In reality, the truth of the matter is that language is a byproduct of silence and not the other way around. And we can notice this very easily right now with how I'm speaking to you. Every time I stop, I return to silence. It is not that the words I am speaking are creating gaps of silence between them. It is that silence is the fundamental layer that allows language and linguistic conceptions to come to fruition. In all essence, silence is the foundation for language itself. A great quote I once read about silence by Ramana Maharshi is that silence is ever speaking. That silence is the perennial flow of language. Essentially, that without silence, without an embracement of silence or an awareness of silence, language wouldn't exist. It would just be a consistent state of vowels, sounds, and mouth noises that never ended. And when this would occur, life as we know would be indistinguishable. Silence gives us the ability to use thoughts to use language, to use conceptual boxes, to create them in our mind, to define things. So when you are out in nature, you can, in that silence, bring up words in your mind and say tree, mountain, fox, bird, and then return to that state of silence. This is what's occurring on a subconscious level. We are always with silence. We are just never aware of that silence. And although silence is always with us and always waiting for our embrace, we tend to either ignore it, not notice it, or continuously fill it with the conceptions and with the words and with the identification of things that make the most sense to us. Because if we can identify what's going on at all times, well, then life becomes a lot easier. It becomes easier because we have to think about it less. We have to do less to understand it. I can learn a lot about a tree, but if I only ever call it a tree and don't just sit and watch the process of how that tree grows, how it blooms, the beauty of how it stands strong in the winds and in the storms, I really won't get just how impressive it is that a tree even has the ability to grow. I simply label it a tree, recognize it in the mind as a tree, and then move on as if nothing never happened. This consistent defining of sorts, this consistent labeling, is in all reality, our awareness, I should say, of this consistent labeling, or should I say, to go even deeper, our unconscious awareness of this consistent labeling of language detaches us from the animal kingdom. It puts us in a place where we no longer feel as if we are even a byproduct of this planet, that we were born from this planet itself, through our parents, through our mothers. We feel like humans in an animal world experiencing a planet, but that we are separate from all of that. That we are our own species, our own individual identities in a world of completely differentiated things that in no way, shape, or form involve me being part of it, especially not part of the ecosystem in which I live. And this is why we see so often the destruction on such a wide scale, the leveling of the rainforest, the pollution of the oceans, the greenhouse emissions getting worse and worse. If we cannot identify, if we cannot embrace beyond identification with life itself, with all of the species and with the planet on which we walk, how can we ever discover in our heart an emotional and literal connection to it all? How can we feel love, joy, sorrow, and empathy for all beings and for the planet at large if we are always defining the world in a way that keeps us separate, keeps us human and everything else them? I was thinking about what great examples there would be to see just how well we have embraced this illusion of the constant chitter-chatter in our mind to separate us from all other life on this planet. And the first thing that came to mind was zoos. How we visit the zoo, how we feel in a zoo, how we treat the zoo. Now, if you ever go to a zoo, you've most likely noticed that there are animals all over the place, that you are inside of an entirely manufactured ecosystem, representing, of course, a larger ecosystem somewhere in the world that functions and has functioned for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. But how often, when you are in a zoo, do you think of yourself as part of that ecosystem? How often do we stop while we are in a zoo and say, wow, I am one of these. I am just like all these animals. We are all part of the same living experience that is here on Earth. The truth is not very often. Most of us go to a zoo and we see it as humans visiting a zoo. And by zoo, we mean everything that isn't us in the animal kingdom, different animals. We label them. We give them names, we understand them, but we don't see ourselves as part of that tree of life. We see a tree of life and all these animals, insects, reptiles, and so forth, but we see it as a tree of life on its own with us over here being aware of it, recognizing it. We don't identify with it. We don't accept that that we are part of it because our mind is so busy defining itself in an opposite way. After all, the ego wants to be special. The ego doesn't want to be synonymized with the animal kingdom, and especially not those in which we put in boxes and cages. But imagine if everybody in that zoo all showed up for just 15 minutes. Imagine if everybody could continue walking, analyzing, observing, but not defining, not speaking. Just watching their breath, just witnessing life move. We would, I truly think, in that moment with thousands of humans in a giant zoo with thousands of animals, we would, that connection, that placement, the equality between animals, seeing that we are part of this animal kingdom would arise. We would recognize our connection to all of this. And we wouldn't have to recognize this connection with words. And that's why silence is so powerful. This connection would be an instinctual feeling. The same way you don't have to think of a puppy dog as cute. You instinctually know that this is a beautiful thing. You have this emotional reaction to life rising, especially innocent life. It's just there on an emotional level. It is beyond, I should say, words. We don't have to think about it at all. The same would occur if we are in this animal kingdom. We would, in that moment, find awareness and equality between ourselves and these other species. In all reality, I dare say, I think that the differences between them would start to fade as well. And it would make us rethink our placement, our purpose, and our reason to be here. So if we can see just how simply language separates us from other animals, it makes sense to see that language also separates us from our true self. And this occurs through the ego speaking constantly without cessation to define itself, to find itself, to secure itself in a place where it feels comfortable. Because all the ego ever wants is to know that it's okay, to know that it is safe, that it has food, that it has shelter, that it is liked, that it is loved, that it can succeed in what it does. The ego will always find space to speak so it can reassure itself that it is all right. And therefore, this is why we become so obsessed with reassuring ourselves that we are all right, that we are fine, that we can do this. And if we can't do it, the ego will attach to that as well. The ego would rather know it's a failure, that it's sad, that no one likes it, than to love itself, to find peace in awareness of oneness. It would rather cling to a degradation of its own existence than it would embrace all of reality without its involvement. This is why it's so hard for us to find silence. And it's also why in Hinduism, Maya, or the illusion of duality, of separateness in life, of separateness between us and the cosmos and all of reality. This is why it is said one of the strongest forms of Maya is language, our words, our definitions. Because the more we conceptualize, the farther we get away from the source. Because source does not fit in a box. Brahman, ultimate reality, the universe beyond conception, beyond understanding, beyond definition, can in no way, shape, or form be explained in words. Even me right now, attempting to explain Brahman, or the idea of Brahman with words, goes against what Brahman is. It is not Brahman. It's a paradox, a catch-22. And this is what we face every day, the paradox of defining the undefinable within ourselves. And this is why Zen, especially, is so against language. Or should I say, against taking language seriously. Taking the way we speak to others seriously, ourselves seriously, and defining things seriously. Now, silence can be a tool to attain complete peace and harmony, to get the universal connectivity that we have inside with everything. But how can we do so if we take words literally? If we think of even something such as enlightenment or God or the universe in definitive terms as permanent things, then we disillude ourselves and find ourselves in a place where we don't know what to do, or how to achieve them, or how to awaken them, or how to recognize them. As if there is some singular form of achievement, of recognition, of awakening in any sense. And the reality is there isn't. There is no unified, grand, proven theory of what peace is, what nirvana is, what enlightenment is, what Brahman is, what God is to any of us, except to us. The individual is what recognizes, or should I say the soul, beyond ego is what recognizes reality. Personal awareness leads to enlightenment, leads to this unionization with God. No definitive explanation in a book, or in this lecture, or in anything else can provide that for us. So long as we define, so long as we put anything into a box, we fall into separateness. But silence changes all of this. For there is no conceptual reality known as separateness and silence. Silence is whole. It is a pure, permeating experience. You can't separate silence. As we said in the beginning of this lecture, the idea that there are even two different types of silence to us as humans is nonsensical. The first type, of course, we can't experience because we hear. And the second type is, therefore, all reality. Complete and pure and utter silence. Nothing to define it as, nothing to box it in as, but just something to experience purely on our own terms. This silence is always there. It is there every time I stop speaking and every time you stop thinking. It is there waiting. It is the underlying layer of reality itself. It is this complete and utter place where we can come to be with awareness, but not to define awareness. To be with everything in one moment without putting a name on what any of that is. And when we embrace silence, when we allow ourselves to sit with silence, it forces the ego into a corner. The ego doesn't exist without thought. The ego doesn't exist without speaking, even just to itself. You can't define yourself or what you like or dislike or what you enjoy or don't enjoy if you aren't thinking. This means that as long as we're thinking, we are most likely an ego. And the second we stop thinking, the ego stops functioning. The rise of what's known as an ego can no longer be there because we are not giving it the opportunity to express itself. In the same way that in complete darkness, light has no potential to be there. Or in complete and utter light, if we are in a room that is just a huge ball of photonic light, there is no potential for darkness. It is pure in what it is. Now we can introduce something to bring a shadow into the room, in the same way we can bring a flashlight into a dark room. But that introduction is what changes everything. If we allow it to be as it is, it will never change. And so goes the soul. So long as we introduce the ego into life, the soul is silenced. But the second we bring silence and the embracement of silence into life, the ego is silenced. Now, to many this seems impossible, but it's really not. It just takes the time to sit down and breathe and come to a place where we are aware of what's going on, but not saying what's going on or explaining what's going on. The Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama, for years attempted to express in his own mind and in his own daily life a way to attain enlightenment. And by enlightenment, we mean a sudden awareness of oneness, a sudden awareness of reality as it is, beyond language, just pure being with it all. This is what enlightenment really kind of means, is just that kind of expressionistic feeling within that we can't put a name on, that has no name, of recognizing it all on an emotional level, on a soul level. But the second we say this is enlightenment, or that is enlightenment, or oh, this must be what it's like, then we're back into the ego game again, trying to define the undefinable. But this just pure realization that comes beyond language, that fills us. And we have this feeling a lot. This feeling can be seen when we get scared by something, we have this shock value inside, or when we see an optical illusion and we get it. This, wow, it's a feeling instinct. It's an emotional reaction. It is a soul being or a light body inside of us kind of awakening to the true nature of reality. Because when we get an optical illusion, we don't think in that moment of seeing it differently, oh, wow, I saw it differently. No, that comes after. Our seeing of it is just a total seeing. It is just the act of seeing and sensing it as it is. And then we snap into defining, okay, now it means it's this. Or, okay, that duck is actually a rabbit. But when we get it, in that split second of getting it, that is an enlightened state of being. That is the aha moment, as it's known as, in enlightenment. Or what it's called, I should say, in place of the word enlightenment. But Siddhartha Gautama would often, for years and years, stick to a certain diet, a certain meditation schedule, a certain regiment of what he thought would lead him to enlightenment, what he thought would give him this awakening that he had so long been searching for, so long been practicing. You know, in his mind, he was still conceptualizing his day-to-day life. He was saying, if I eat this way, if I analyze what I'm doing, if I pay direct attention specifically to what I put in my body, what I think, what I feel when I meditate, then I will reach this, then I will attain this, because I'm doing it the right way. Which, looking back, means he was doing it an incorrect way, a conceptual way, instead of a pure way. And at one point he noticed this, and he recognized that he was just trying to make enlightenment become something that would fit his schedule, that would fit his practice. And this is why we see so often people practicing spiritual ways of life, yoga, meditation, Hinduism, Buddhism, but as long as they find their teachings to be the only source of change, it's very rare that they awaken from it. Alan Watts would often say the moment you start taking religion seriously is the moment it doesn't work for you. That when you can allow the practice to be the practice and you to go along as best you can, freely, floating, enjoying, at peace, is when it really starts to work for you. So what Siddhartha Gautama eventually did was he the day before he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he said, to hell with this, essentially. I'm going to revert back into just being. I'll just eat a relaxed meal, not overthink about it. Just be with whatever meal is here, enjoy it. I will get sleep whenever I feel sleep coming upon me. I will wake as I wake, and now I'll go sit. It wasn't trying to define how he would do it or why or what reasoning doing it was there for. He simply followed his intuition. He allowed reality to speak for itself. And on his end, he was simply going along with it all. And that is why when he said, I will not rise until I've attained this awareness, until I've experienced this experience. I will not allow. When he finds silence, embracement of silence. See, the problem is with attachment, especially in Buddhism and in Hinduism, we think of attachment as things. But we don't think of attachment as thoughts, as words. This is why Siddhartha Gautama had such a hard time attaining enlightenment. It's because he didn't recognize that his own thoughts were an attachment, and that silence was the release. That embracing silence was the key that he had been missing this entire time. For however would we, without this sort of guidance, find a way to recognize that what we are thinking is keeping us from what we are pursuing? That peace and joy and harmony with life is tainted in the cessation of not only attachment to all physical things in life, but to the suffering that comes from realization as well, and from our constant chatter in our mind. And that's why meditation is such a major part of Buddhism, Hinduism, and pretty much every Eastern religion there is. It is a way, a doorway, that we can recognize our own mind as something that is holding us back. because it has been infiltrated by ego time and time again. And this is why, for these philosophies, in almost every school of philosophies and religions, a monastic setting of silence is observed and is very, very important. It is often the core tenet of a practice. So if we can't find space to embrace silence in our daily life, we will forever be lost. No matter how much we practice our spiritual practices, no matter how many of my videos you watch, no matter how many other lectures you go off and watch, no matter how many books I read, if I can't sit and experience it all, how will I ever meet God? How will I ever come to realize the universe in its wholeness as it is? To have that experiential realization instead of trying to force upon myself and my ego what I want that experience to be, which is a definitive realization. A realization that occurs in a way in which I can describe. The moment you can sit down and be with it all, experience the rising and the falling, experience the sounds around you, experience the sensations in your body without identifying with such experiences, is the moment for the first time you cross over from the ego and into the soul. You cross over from conceptual awareness to oneness, to pure unaltered awareness, or as Ram Dass would often call it, to pure loving awareness. A place that has no motive, that has nothing to be gained, that has nothing but what it is to offer. And that because of that, we can accept it fully. We can use it to our advantage fully without having to think about how we can use it. It is an instinctual facet to our growth, even if we aren't trying to implement it as such. And so you can see, I hope, why silence has to be accepted. Why, if we don't practice silence, we can go nowhere in life. We can make no true change in ourselves because the ego will always be there to downplay what we are learning, what we are experiencing, or what we are practicing. From things that we do in daily life are impacted by our ability to embrace the silence between the thoughts, between speaking and between doing, or by our ability to fill it with ego and therefore rid ourselves of peace. To make the world into something that we get instead of allowing ourselves to flow with life as it flows every single day. Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, "In total silence, the mind comes upon the eternal." In complete silence, in a space beyond the chitter-chatter of the mind, we experience God. We experience union with all of reality. With Brahman, which is God, which is not a thing, not an idea. So any idea of God in itself is our ego conceptualizing the ultimate reality. But in silence, when we transcend not only what we assume God to be, or what we assume the universe to be, or ultimate reality to be, when we transcend this space of fitting it into the category of mind, of thought that we want it to fit, do we experience it. Only when we stop our obsession with figuring out what it is in a way that makes sense to us does it fill us fully on its own accord. In this silence, after our death, the Leela, or the play of the universe, continues on, ever marching. It is an orchestra that never ends. And when we come to silence, it is us simply awakening to our true nature. And that everything that is beautiful, is whole, is there, is always, always going to be there. But that it doesn't need our personal input to be what it is. That if we can accept its realm of reality, through the way that we like to personify ultimate reality, or personify God and the universe at large. And I found that we see this, we accept this, even if we don't know we do, here in the West. think about how we handle death. What is the one thing that almost every funeral, every religion, and every culture does when a loved one dies and at a funeral? What do we give them? And what do we give ourselves in that moment of sorrow? We give a moment of silence. We give life itself the time it needs in that moment to just be with this occurrence, with what we consider to be a loss. We don't speak throughout the entire sermon. We don't constantly think about what is going on. No matter what has happened or how it occurred, on the deepest level of mourning in the soul, to help us understand life, the experience of human nature, and of what it means to be someone, the best way in which we can convey that we are here experiencing is through silence. It's through giving this situation, not just for ourselves, but for the deceased, silence. Being with it all as it is. Because in that moment we can see that it's all just part of the process. And silence awakens us to that. This is where it's so clear as day, especially in the West, that silence is transcendent. That we don't have to identify with everything. And that there are certain times where we can be with silence, and that stillness speaks. As Eckhart Tolle would always say, stillness speaks. And this is true. It speaks volumes. It is its own thing. It is its own flow with its own pace. And we are all, I should say, not passengers, but participants in this game of life, this experience on Earth. And yet the flow of silence, or the flow of the universe, marches on. And when we have certain things that happen to us, major things in life happen to us, and we embrace silence, we get it for a moment. We have a few minutes to really comprehend on a soul level how this impacts us, how it helps us grow, and how we can change because of it. So why don't we embrace that silence more often? This is the key. This is the whole purpose of spiritual practice, is to come to peace with silence in daily life as often as you can. To be with it, but not to be defined by it. Or to think you are stuck in a certain way of things, not only in the mind, but in daily life as well. In what you do, with who you are, and with what you want life to be. We don't have to fit everything into boxes. In Buddhism, this is called the noble silence, and was a stance that Siddhartha Gautama took very often when questions were raised that he could not answer. See, for us in the West, silence is also detrimental because we have to have an answer for everything. And the moment we cease to have an answer is the moment we fall into chaos, and the ego really starts to have anxiety, worry, doubts, and so forth. If we can't logically come up with a way to define something, or a way to describe something that is satisfactory to the ego itself, we are upset by it, we are distraught by it, we are maybe even distanced from it completely. This occurs all over the world. I get questions very often as to what happens when we die. You know, what is the meaning of life? How did it all begin? And Siddhartha Gautama would just simply meet questions like that with silence. Because that silence brings us back to this space beyond this worry, beyond this neuroses of the mind that so often throws us into turmoil. And that silence brings about the answer, which is just be with it. Just be here. Bring your awareness back to this moment. Questions like that, while you can't answer them, not only do answers not exist, but even if they did, would they be sufficient? Would those answers be enough to the point where you wouldn't have to ask more questions because of the answers you've received? Or would it just fractalize into an endless, endless desire to understand everything that there is to understand in the universe? Would it lead us to this place in the ego where we think that we can understand the totality of being somehow, even though we are simply a part of this being manifest with the conscious mind that we have? This is the ego's biggest hurdle, is that it wants to get everything, but it doesn't understand that getting it is not a conceptual thing, that getting it is an experiential thing, and that we can only ever get it, we can only ever come to this universal awareness through letting the universe speak to us, through letting the universe fill us and expand from within, versus trying to fit the universe into our own mind and heart. And until we allow ourselves to do this, until we allow this silence to fill us, full of love, full of understanding, on a level that transcends the mind and the ego, if we cannot do this, and until we do this, we will be lost, and we will be stuck in this cycle of repetitive question and answer, no matter, again, how many spiritual things we practice, and no matter how many tools and how many gurus we have, until we are embracing and loving it as it is. In every moment that we stop speaking, we will find faults, and we will find issues, and we will fall into turmoil with the self. But the moment we embrace that silence, the moment we love it and fill ourselves with it, the self disappears on a level. And we become nothing but the soul. We become nothing but a reflection of the whole here and now on this planet. And that is how one meets God. That is how one meets the universe face to face, in the heart. Through love, through pure, unadulterated awareness, we can come to get it, to truly get it, on a level that is much more complex, much deeper, and much more meaningful than any sentence, paragraph, or word could ever convey. This form of all answers, being there internally, being something we can awaken to and experience right now, the second we stop ourselves from speaking constantly or from thinking constantly, is known as Manavratha. At least it's known as that in Sanskrit, which potentially means, or essentially means, keeping in silence with the soul. Being there with it all and not speaking. Being there with it all and not defining. In all reality, not even noticing that you're there with it all, but just the experience of being there with it all is this awakening experience, is this enlightening experience, and is the experience that will bring you to a place in the soul where the ego no longer has control, where the ego no longer dictates your daily life, and where your practice no longer has doubts, but is full of nothing but love and understanding and awareness. In an old Hindu parable, and this is something I wrote down because I really want you guys to understand and to memorize it. In an old Hindu parable, Lord Ganesha once said, the first step to self-control is speech. Whoever cannot control his speech loses his energy. In essence, silence isn't missing out. We do not miss out on light when we embrace silence. Instead, we are empowered by silence. Silence is the embracement of life beyond conception. We do not become weaker because we want to sit in a meditative state, or sit in nature and be with it, or sit in our room or office and just experience it as it is. This doesn't weaken us or hold us back from growth. Instead, it empowers us. It helps us grow because it gives us a foundational layer of understanding that we don't have to define, that we can feel.
Oh, man. I hate it. And we're back.
That we don't have to define, that we can feel, and that we can use to better ourselves forever forward. Now, we'll end this lecture here, just so we can see that we really, by embracing silence, not only meet the universe face to face, but can find a place within ourselves to live fully from, free of doubt, free of worry, free of the burden that is suffering in life. That is all there in the silent space that is pure unaltered awareness. And that silence is achievable in many ways, mostly through meditation. Meditation is our greatest tool because it teaches us to embrace silence. We can be silent in every moment, but for many of us it's hard to do so without a teacher. And meditation is this universal teacher manifest with us, just sitting and breathing. So what I can say is, at the end of this video, we will have a few guided meditations that I have made.
Okay. Okay, I need to sit up. Hold on. I'm kind of sinking into my bed and pillow. Okay, so a lot to say on that. First of all, as he was talking about all the different ways in which we view silence and how we use it, I was brought to mind a form of silence that I have seen being used. Imagine with me for a moment that you're in church. Regardless of what sect of church you're a part of is irrelevant. But just imagine with me for a moment that you're in church, right? And the worship, the opening worship has been done, the message has been done, and now you're at the part of response time where you're free to worship again, or leave, or whatever you feel led to do. And imagine you feel led to seek prayer from someone. And you go and you tell them what God has put in your heart to pour out before Him, to be open and to be with it all, and to just, to hope for something to be of value and worth. Now, normally when that happens, someone will instantly feel led to go to a verse or instantly know what to say, and then will tell you. But what I'm about to suggest is what I feel like we as believers in God should do more often, especially when it comes to sharing our hearts with each other. And I know this because I've experienced this myself, where I've poured my heart out to someone who I wanted to pray for me. In fact, I'm going to, this is where I'm going to suggest this to you. So I went and I received prayer. This was a long time ago, like a couple years ago. And I went to receive prayer for what's going on in my family. And I didn't tell the person everything, but I told them enough to where they understood what I was going through and that I was in pain and everything. And this is what he did. He didn't immediately tell me what I needed to do. He didn't immediately tell me he didn't show me a verse that he read to me. What he did was he said, we're going to just be in a space of silence, and we're just going to let God speak in that silence. And I obviously was like, okay, but in my mind, I was thinking, silence? Isn't that not a friend? Isn't that an enemy kind of thing? So I was still trying to process that whole thing. And so we were in that silence. We were in that silence for about like a couple minutes. And then he came back and he said, I don't know if this is going to ring true with you or not, but I just got the sense from God that you were called to be a pillar for your family. Now, My view on that now is just like it was when it first happened. In some senses, I agree with it. In some senses, I disagree with it. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, this is just an extra way in which silence can be used. Um, in fact, another way that silence can be used, and I knew he was gonna hit it because I've seen this video before, and as soon as I heard him say it, I instantly was in my mind going pipe bomb, and that is that whenever a loved one dies, regardless of whether we're close with them or not, we always take a moment of silence. In fact, I'm gonna share a little bit of story with you. I I was in California with my mom and my sister, and we went to go to mourn the death of my grandma, my mom's mom. Um, and it was a bittersweet thing. One, because I got to see family members that I haven't seen since I was a little kid. So it was nice to kind of see changes and catch up and everything. But it was under unfortunate circumstances, being that my grandma died. Um, but the morning of the funeral, when we were in the Catholic Church, everybody was. Um, as the priest was asking all of us to think of a word to describe Grandma, I instantly just entered a space of silence and just asked God, you know, yes, I didn't know Grandma that well, but I do believe that there is a way to remember her and to try to keep her memory alive. Even though I didn't know her, is there any word that you have for me that I can share with the family? And as I was listening to everyone else's words, which were all great, some of which were funny because, you know, they were also true because some family members were like, yep, that was her. Um, but as they were starting to, share their words and everything, I was waiting for my word. And the word that kept coming to me was unconditional. Even though I didn't know Grandma very well, she was an example of how to be truly unconditional to someone. And it can be debatable because, for some people, in some areas, their unconditional love is there, but in other areas, you wonder if they're really even showing unconditional love at all because some ways that they're showing love is different than from other ways that they show love. Um, and I don't know. I just felt like that she was just an unconditional loving person, that she was trying to show it the best way she could, or the only way that she could. Um, and then I felt called by God because I not only got the word unconditional, but I also felt called by God in that space of silence to go up and honor your grandmother by being a pallbearer, by carrying her body, her spirit, to the gravesite. And so I did. I went over to the gravesite, and I also got a chance to talk with the priest on my own time and everything like that. But then there was this moment where I was just silent. I was just embracing the silence. And I was just looking at the beautiful sky and the beautiful weather. And I was looking at all of the gravestones, and a lot of the gravestones had a lot of artistry to them. There were some that had a nice carving of Jesus by the person's name and everything. And in that silence, I also felt that if and when my time comes where I die and my time is up, whenever that is, I know how I would want to go. I know how I would want to be remembered. I know how I want to be buried. I want to my I don't know why. There's just something about being buried under the ground with other souls, whether you know them or not, and just being in a beautiful um, property, of a church that just fills me with such peace, you know, and and I don't know. It's just something that it may change as I get older, but for right now, that's just kind of what I was met with in the silence of that time. Um, so now onto the video. Um, so something else that he did say that I really liked was that silence, in its truest essence, is a state beyond speaking and thinking. It's you know knowing that speaking and thinking can be and is effective, but to know that silence can actually do things that speaking and thinking can't. um that's why I feel like a lot of times when people, especially couples, when they when like the wife or the husband asks the other a question and they don't respond right away, the person who asked the question then goes, "Did you hear me? Or did you understand me what I'm saying?" And they go, "Yeah, I heard you. I'm just processing everything so I can answer you truthfully." I think a lot of times, you know, one person of the relationship will kind of, misunderstand that or whatever. Um, which is why a lot of times when I'm asked questions that I feel like I don't know the answer to, I don't respond right away or make up an answer. I just literally enter that space of silence and just ponder everything. I just know somebody's rolled there. My bad. Where I just breathe in and out, and I just process everything, and I go and I just say what's on my mind. You know, um, and um, that's silence is definitely an enlightening time. In fact, I'm actually reminded of another the other channel that I've shown you before, Enlightenment. And the video that he does, One God in Many Forms, he does this. He quotes this guy by saying, "The only proof for God's existence is union with Him." And when you pray to Him, or you're worshiping Him, or you are silent with it all, and you're taking in all of that positivity and love, what you're really doing is you're unionizing yourself with God. You know, you're you're bringing yourself one step closer to becoming more one with Him than you were the day before, and that's our ultimate goal. You know, isn't it, as believers in God, to strive to become more and more like Him, to become more and more in tune and more in one with Him? You know, um, So, so those are my thoughts on the video, but I'm not going to end the video here. I actually feel so strongly about silence that I actually want to lead us through a time of meditation and just being silent. So I'm going to put my laptop down. Crap, here we go. Okay. Okay. So this is how it's going to work. So, um, whether you want to get down on your knees and pray, or you want to do what I'm going to do, which is I'm not going to do this, but I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna do it in the form of this. Um, and what I want this time to be of is a time where we just close our eyes, we just take in everything that is going on in our lives right now. Just sit with it all, and in doing so, expect God to meet us and to hopefully get a sense of what our goal should be when it comes to one evolving, um, with evolving in one's relationship with Him spiritually, but also to have a better sense of how to deal, um, with silence and everything. So um, we're gonna go for a couple minutes, and I will, and I'm gonna let you guys know what I thought in closing the video. So let's do this. Okay. So, I don't know if that helped, or I don't know if something came to mind, but there were some things that came to mind for me. Um, one of them actually is something that has been said by more than just God. Um, it's been said by um, family and friends, and it's something that I've been trying very hard to detach my ego from this. But it's just so hard because of everything that's going on in my life when it comes to the family. But the main thing that I got from this space of silence and unionizing myself with God in His presence was to just be with it all, to not worry about how this is gonna fix itself, how this is going to work out for my good. Just damn it. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was just trying to see if this would. Damn it. Okay. Um, is to really just sit with it all, and to just look at it from the mindset of even though this is going on in life right now, even though this does suck, to not see this as the end. Do not see this as, you know, a time to worry. See this as a time to grow, to evolve, to see this as a time to draw closer to me. Um, this is a dark time. You can grow just as effectively, if not more, with me in the dark than you can in the light. The other thing that I got was, actually, believe it or not, I actually felt the presence of my Grandpa Bot, who I was extremely close with, and still am, because I'm connected still to his spirit. And I just felt his presence and his voice not only echoing what God and all the other friends have told me when it came to the family, but also when it comes to my spiritual journey. I just heard him just, put a gentle hand on my shoulder, and him just saying, I know that you're at a time in your life when people may or may not understand what you're going through, or why you're at where you're at in life. But do not give up hope. Keep on the path that you're on right now. Keep on evolving with God the way that you're doing it right now. Do not stop. And it's okay. It's all okay. I'm with you. I'm with you in the highs, and I'm here with you in the lows. And that really means a lot to me, because when he was alive, I was very close with him. Probably not as close as my dad was to him, but I was, in my own way, close with him. And to be able to come back from this space of silence that I was just in, and to hear God, and to also hear my grandpa speak, is very, very empowering. It's rejuvenating my energy, and it's rejuvenating my hope, to where I'm continuing to understand that all of these, things that I'm, feeling when it comes to, being depressed about, the family, and hopeless about, finding love and stuff like that, that's really all the ego. That's all it is. It's just the ego giving me false evidence, and is doing it in a way that makes it appear as real. And I know that this is just a season. I know that me appearing emotional or sad when it comes to family and stuff, I know that that is genuinely not me. I know that I am not this person. I am normally an upbeat person. I'm an outgoing person. But because of some of these things that have been going on, I've also developed a introvert side, and I'm a hybrid now. I'm a hybrid. I'm both an introvert and an extrovert. And it's something that, I want to be more of an extroverted person than an introvert. It's just kind of hard when some of these things are going on. But despite the fact that this is all hard, I can rest assured in the fact that all I have to do to get that peace, to get that burden off of my shoulders, is to just Do not speak. Do not think. Just be silent. Just meet God in that space, and He will relieve me of that pain. He'll relieve me of that suffering. And it's as simple as that, you know? Um, but yeah, that's my video. Uh, Thank you guys for watching um, and for just continuing to be with me on this journey. I may or may not do a video Saturday. I'll definitely do at least one or a couple more next week. You can feel free to, as I'm thinking about what I should do those on, to suggest me topics to do. But until then, I wish you guys a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.